Alright, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah wa ba'd. So the month of Ramadan is around the corner. Ramadan is going to be starting on Thursday. And before we start the month, it's very important that we learn some things that we may not know and we should know. And sometimes it's been a year. Sometimes we just need a refresher. We've already learned some of these things and we just need a reminder about, what are some of the basic etiquettes of fasting, some of the basic rules of fasting, what other things are we supposed to be doing in the month of Ramadan. So we're going to get started. Now normally the content that I'm going to be presenting to you should be presented in about 2 hours. Oh, we do have a screen. Okay, mashallah. So the content normally should be presented to you in about 2 hours. We have about 40 minutes. So this is going to be the Cliff Notes, the summarized version, and there will be some time for Q&A. But because usually a lot of the questions that I get will be coming up in the slide, I'm gonna, or in the sections, I'm gonna cover one section, and then after covering that section, I'm gonna open it up for questions, and then the next section, and then we open it up for questions. Okay? All right. So fasting. So fasting is going to be prescribed in the month of Ramadan, and the purpose of fasting is to learn self-control, and that self-control is going to bring people closer to Allah. Fasting in a nutshell is refraining from food, refraining from drink, yes, that includes even one sip of water, and refraining from intimacy. Intimacy meaning intercourse, starting from dawn until sunset. So this is basically fasting in a nutshell. Now we're going to get into lot more details here, but the reason why we fast is that fasting in the month of Ramadan is the month in which the Quran was revealed. So we're commemorating the Quran by fasting. Now who needs to fast in the month of Ramadan? Everyone who's a Muslim needs to fast unless they are in the exemption category. So what are those people who are exempted from fasting? Number one, children don't need to fast. So children should try to fast once they reach the age of around 7 to 10 years old. And once they reach the age of actual puberty, then they're mandated to fast, right? But prior to that, they're not mandated. So usually when it comes to prayer, children should start praying at around what age? When should they start trying to pray? 7, right. And they need to make sure that they're praying by around the age of 10, and they're obligated when they hit puberty. When it comes to fasting, it's a little bit different, slightly different. They have a little bit more leeway. And that's because fasting is much more difficult. So it depends on their body. It depends on the season. It depends on, whether they can handle it or not. So when it comes to fasting, children should try to start fasting a little bit before they hit the age of puberty to get used to it. Maybe try a half day, maybe try a water fast, or something like that. But then once they reach puberty, they're supposed to be fasting. But they can fall into the category of someone who is ill if they happen to be, their body simply cannot take it. Fasting is going to hurt, it's going to feel a little bit uncomfortable, but you're not supposed to be like you cannot function at all. Most kids, they can start fasting even before the age of puberty, and when they have to run the mile in school, they can still do the mile, and they're not going to drink any water, and they'll be fine. They won't pass out. If they're going to pass out just by jogging a mile, they probably shouldn't be fasting because it means that their body can't handle it yet. So that's category number one. Category number two of people who are exempted from fasting are those people who have a mental incapacity. Not a mental illness. It's a difference between mental illness and a mental incapacity. So they have, if there's a handicap or they're mentally challenged, they're not able to function properly, then in that case they're exempted from fasting. And somebody just asked me this question today, which I never even thought about. It's a great question though. If their child has grown up and they're an adult, but they're still mentally handicapped, do you have to pay a compensation payment and feed a poor person for every day that they miss? And the answer is no, because they were never obligated to fast in the first place, just like children. Okay, so this is category number two. Need anything from me or no?
I'm trying to get everything.
Okay, no problem, no problem. I emailed it to you, inshallah. Okay. Number three, category number three, exemption, is if you're sick, you don't need to fast. So what does sickness mean? What does illness mean? If here's the definition of illness. If fasting is likely gonna cause harm to your body, not just discomfort, but harm to your body, or it's gonna increase your illness if you're fasting, or it's gonna delay your recovery and you're already ill, then you're excused and you don't need to make up your fast. Now, the severity of this illness is gonna be determined by consulting an expert and somebody who has an understanding of the importance of fasting. So you don't just go to your doctor always and say, you know what, do I need to fast? Many doctors, what they'll do is they'll be like, it's always better to be on the safe side and not fast. And if you go to a Muslim doctor, they're going to say, and a Muslim practicing doctor is going to tell you, it's always better to be on the safe side and fast. Why? Two people trained in the same school. Because one of them understands the importance of fasting, and if the other one doesn't, then they're just going to say, they don't want to be sued by you, right? They don't want to deal with that, but they're just going to give you the most, super duper opinion that's going to be in line with whatever is going to be more comfortable for their medical practice, but not necessarily understanding the importance of fasting for Muslims. So make sure you're consulting the right person if you're deciding whether you're exempt or not. And when it comes to women who are pregnant, and when it comes to women who are breastfeeding, it comes in the same category. It's not an illness. Pregnancy is not an illness. You should love your children. The children are coming. But when it comes to pregnancy, if there's a fear, a legitimate fear for the health of the mother or for the health of the child, then she's exempted from fasting. But is pregnancy going to last for years? It shouldn't. Child should come out eventually. So she has to make up those fasts after Ramadan is over. When it comes to breastfeeding, this is a common question that you get as well. They said, if I'm fasting and I'm breastfeeding, then what happens is my milk can dry up. It's likely that my milk will dry up in some cases. And they say, but I don't want my milk to dry up, and I can, whatever they call, I forgot all the terms now. It's been a long time. But, all the... you can squeeze out the milk and freeze it and all of that stuff, but they said that's still not going to work for me. So if there's a real legitimate case where the milk will dry up due to breastfeeding, then a woman is able to skip her fast during that time and maybe try to make them up in the winter time when they're shorter, if that won't affect it. But if it will affect it and it's happened before and that's what the expert opinion says, then they're exempted from that as well. Can everyone see the slides? Okay, good. So we are here, right? We're right there. So illness, in the same category comes pregnancy and breastfeeding. Now this is illness that's going to be temporary. This illness is going to go away after a week or after 6 months or after a year. Those fasts need to be made up that you miss. Then there's a second category, what's called chronic inability, which means that you're in a state where you will not be able to make up these fasts. You have a permanent condition. So this could be a permanent condition of, diabetes. It could be a permanent condition of someone who's just very, very old and their body is just not functioning in the same way. So in that case, they're not going to be able to make it up. So if they're not going to be able to make it up, they're exempted from fasting, and they're going to feed a poor person for every single day of fasting that they miss. Now, feeding a poor person means feeding them for a day. And the average is like 2 meals. Some people eat 3 meals, some people eat 2 meals. 2 meals, you approximate how much money that is. We calculated it's about $15 a day. You're going to pay that every single day for every day of fasting that you miss. So this is chronic inability. Then traveling. So somebody who's traveling is exempted. Who must fast? If you're not traveling, then you need to fast if you're not in one of these categories. Traveling means traveling quite a long distance. It doesn't mean you're driving to work and you're driving 51 miles to work and you say, oh, I work 51 miles away to LA, not going to be fasting. No, traveling means you're traveling from like one city to another distant city somewhere. Now the question is,